A very warm welcome to all our viewers and speakers to the panel number 2 of the third Geneva Forum 2020. Yesterday, we had a very interesting discussion and presentation on panel number 1, and today we will be starting the panel number 2 titled Religious Persecution, Crackdown on People of Faith in China. Before I start the introduction of our moderator, representative of Office of Tibet-London, Sonam Frasi, I would like to just give out a reminder for all the housekeeping rules. I would request all the participants today to please stay on mute. And if you have any questions, please click on the raise hand button and your names will be called out by the moderator. Also for the Facebook viewers, please comment your questions to the panelists and those will be passed on to the moderator. So please permit me to read out the introduction of Representative Sonam Frasi from Office of Tibet-London. Mr. Sonam Frasi is the representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in London that oversees Tibet affairs in the UK, Ireland, Northern Europe, Poland, and Baltic states. He is also a member of the Tibetan Task Force for Negotiation on Sino-Tibetan Dialogue. During his term as a member of the Tibetan Parliament in Exile, he represented the Tibetans in Europe from 2001 to 2011 and pioneered the exchange program of Tibetan parliamentary delegations and their British counterpart between London and Dharamsala. His other early international engagements include the organization of the International Lawyers' Conference on Tibet in 1993 and the Conference of Sino-Tibetan Dialogue to Find Common Grounds in 1997. Mr. Sonam Frasi is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Institute of Directors, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House, and the Royal Society of Astronomy. He was born in Rawang in Western Tibet. Over to you, Kongo Sonam Frasi.
Good afternoon, Shukila. Thank you so much for the long introduction. I would like to say welcome to all the panelists on this second series of our Geneva Forum's webinar. Before I go on to the specific speakers, I would like to make a small introduction to the topic, and then I will call each of the speakers, and then I will introduce each one by one, as has been advertised. So we have a topic, very gruesome topic today, religious persecution, crackdown on the people of faith. I would like to say by saying thank you so much for the Office of Tibet in Geneva for organizing this webinar. So important that this subject is out in the open for the international community to see and hear about the purges and the inhuman treatment by the communist regime of China towards the people of faith in the People's Republic of China. We have to remember and remind ourselves that communism in China is only 71 years old. The concept of communism and the founders of communist regimes everywhere in the world came out of violence and through power struggles. The Communist Party of China and the government is ruthless, despotic, one-way, one-party dictatorship. Therefore, communism and its powers existed and exist only through the insecurity leading to violence, intimidation, and control of dissension to their ideology. The theory of communism, peddled by the likes of Vladimir Lenin, Mao Zedong, Ho Chi Minh, and Fidel Castro, were far removed from the practice of communism once they were in power. What transpired in each one of them was the nation ruled by corrupt party officials with no civil liberties and freedom of religion and human rights. Of course, religion is a poison, the most infamous quote of Mao Zedong to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Religion and religious institutions were branded reactionary, therefore assumed and treated as enemies of the Communist Party and of the state. We know from historical writings that Chairman Mao was very jealous and interested in the Vatican, and especially the Pope and the Vatican's ability to command allegiance beyond national boundaries. The tenacity and the effectiveness of the Catholics perturbed the communist regime. Ideological intolerance by the Communist Party of China against religion and practitioners have led to constant persecution of Tibetan Buddhists, Christians, both Catholics and Protestants, Muslims and Falun Gongs and other religions. After 70 years of ruthless persecution in Tibet, the spirit of Tibetan Buddhism hasn't diminished. The ruthless persecution of Chinese in PRC hasn't broken the spirit. The ruthless persecution of Uyghur Muslims haven't broken their faith in Allah. The ruthless persecution and imprisonment of the New Age religious order of Falun Dafa practitioners have not ceased their determination. The new mantra from Xi Jinping is sinicization of all religion into Chinese socialist system, where loyalty to the Communist Party is prioritized over religion in the name of patriotism. People of ethnic and religious nationalities are forced to love a corrupt and atheist regime. The question now is, will it work in this sinicization world? Or will Chairman Xi Jinping continue with the fear and wonders like his predecessor Mao Zedong, that spirituality and religious belief has no territorial boundaries, and devotees and practitioners continue to solace their religious teachings from institutions like the Dalai Lamas of Tibet, Vatican Pope, archbishops, and that the communism is doomed to fail in breaking the spirit of religious communities in the communist China, no matter whatever they try. So, to discuss this, we have a huge wealth of experts who will share details of the horrors perpetrated by the Chinese Communist Party. So I would like to go first to the first speaker, who will be Dr. Tenzin Sutim. Dr. Tenzin Sutim is a visiting research fellow at the Tibet Policy Institute, an independent research policy institute at the Central Tibetan Administration. He completed his doctorate thesis in the relationship between India and China between 1963 and 2010 from the University of Madras. He conducts research on India-China relations and the impacts and implications on issues concerning Tibet, in particular focus on surveillance and militarization. Dr. Sutim has published papers and articles on Tibet Policy Institute journals, regular contributors to the strategic analysis journals, Think Tank India, and World Focus Journal. So I would like to invite Dr. Sutim La. The screen is yours. Thank you.
Tashidele, to Representative and Moderator Sonam La, and also representative from different office from Office of Tibet, and also to distinguished speakers and all those who are listening. I would like to request everyone to imagine for a minute. Imagine tomorrow if a complete stranger walks in and stays with you and your family for weeks, for months, observing your every movement, what you do, what you think, to whom you pray. Imagine tomorrow if you are prevented from visiting temples, churches for prayer. Imagine if you are punished from learning your own mother tongue and practicing your own religion. But what I'm going to tell you is not an imagination. It has happened in Tibet, and it is still happening in Tibet. I'm going to speak in following subheadings: what has happened in Tibet, and what is happening in Tibet right now, and why the Tibetan Buddhism is still repressed in Tibet. Around 70 years ago, before Tibet was invaded by China, CCP soldiers were given strict instruction by the Communist Party chairman Mao not to harm the religious sentiments of the Tibetan people. The plan was to temporarily win the hearts and the mind of the Tibetan people. Hence, no one should not intrude into their religious boundaries, and they should respect Tibetan culture and religion. Not only this, later in the stage 17-point agreement of 1951, which was signed under duress, CCP promised through the 7th and 13 points that the religious belief, custom, and habit of the Tibetan people shall be respected, and Lama monastery will be protected. And yet it also mentioned that the People Liberation Army entering Tibet shall abide by all the above policies and shall also be fair in buying and selling, and shall not arbitrarily take a single needle or thread from the people. However, the irony is that CCP have taken everything from the Tibetan people, even their freedom to learn Tibetan language and practice their own religion. And this is still happening in Tibet. For the past few years, the intensity and the diversity of China's surveillance system in Tibet have been growing to an unprecedented scale. Findings from Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy, Freedom House, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International confirm the deteriorating human rights situation in Tibet. Starting in 2011, around 21,000 Chinese Communist Party members were stationed in every villages and monastery in Tibet, observing every human movement in villages and monastery as well. And also through this village-based cadre system, which covered, according to official account, over 1,700 religious sites with 46,000 monks and nuns in Tibet. Between 2012 and 2016, the Tibet Autonomous Region established 81,140 double-link households in Tibettv, covering over 3 million residents and virtually the entire region populations. These units were formed to monitor potential threats and so-called religious extremism and targeted individuals on the watch list. One of the main intentions behind all this mechanism is, according to the official statement, to catch any incident early, catch them catch them when they are small, or catch them quickly and catch them completely. Because of this intensive surveillance system all over Tibet, Sri Wese, a Tibetan writer, poet, and vocal critic of CCP's assimilative policies in Tibet, has clearly depicted the dark clouds of fear and suspiciousness hovering over the capital of Tibet. And she said, and I quote, "In the heart of old Lhasa, around the Chogang temple, one can often see armed police randomly stop monks or youths in Tibetan garb for interrogation and registrations. Ordinary Tibetans are on guard with each other, even their own relatives, fearing there may be police informers or spies among them." For the past few years, CCP is systematically infringing traditional and religious values and practice which were earlier completely out of the CCP political radar. Even small children were not spared. For instance, beginning in 2017, a series of notices were issued by the school authorities in Lhasa, urging parents not to allow their children to take part in any religious activities or to visit religious places such as monasteries. Later, it became more stringent and very invasive in nature. And according to the sources acquired by Human Rights Watch, and I quote, "If Tibetan students are found wearing prayer beads or cords or having money or image of deities and lama in their school book or school bags, they are lectured and punished. And the parents are involved and they have to make a confession. Political conducts are detected and black marks given." In 2019, a notice obtained by Human Rights Watch, which banned the retired Tibetan government employees from taking part in any religious activities, such as performing Kora or circumambulations. at a religious site or temple. The recent removal of prayer flags from the mountain tops and village in Chamdo and Kolo is a direct infringement on Tibetan people's traditional customs and religious faith. And all these measures indicate increasing religious repression in Tibet. Now, my second part is why Tibetan Buddhism is still repressed in Tibet. You know, Mao understood the importance of destroying an identity lies in destroying its language. But in Tibet, he realized, the importance of Tibetan Buddhism as well. Hence, Tibetan Buddhism also became another important target for destructions. From 1950 to 1976, particularly more intensive during the so-called democratic reforms of 1955 and the Cultural Revolution of 1966. During this period, more than 6,000 monasteries were destroyed. The late Panchen Lama, 10th Panchen Lama, in his 70,000 character petition, captured the serious impacts on the Tibetan Buddhism. And however, the current level Panchen Lama whereabout is still unknown, making him, I believe, the longest serving house arrest woman in the world. There is a shared consensus among the writings of scholars and professors like Sri Shakya, Sri Thopgel, Robert Bernard, Divesh Anand, with erudite researchers from right groups such as Sri Somo from the Tibetan Center for Human Rights Democracy, Sarah Cook from Freedom House, Sophie Richardson from Human Rights Watch, and Kate Center about the causes and implication for the CCP application of continuous repressive policies in Tibet. In most of their work and report, they have emphasized on the sense of perceived insecurity experienced by the CCP on the growing fascination of Tibetan Buddhism among majority of Chinese and total devotion by Tibetan monks, nuns, and Tibetan people towards Tibetan Buddhism and the Dalai Lama. These factors really make them highly insecure about the legitimacy and control of the Tibetan people and Chinese people. The destruction of Hlurunggar and Yangtzegar, the two religious academies in eastern Tibet, testifies CCP insecurities about the growing strength and size of these two academies. A joint report released by Free Tibet and Tibet Watch in 2017 concluded that the main reason behind the destruction of Hlurunggar Academy is not concerned toward the resident alleged safety from the risk of fire and overcrowding. Rather, the academy have been seen as a major threat to the authority or legitimacy of the CCP rules. Because these academies have attracted thousands of Tibetan people, Chinese followers as well, from China and Southeast Asian countries. These developments are seen as a very unhealthy for the CCP credibility and legitimacy. Hence, they too needed to be subdued completely. Andrew Zen, a senior fellow in China study at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, based in Washington, D.C., whose recent research finding has uncovered the existence of military-style coercive labor program in Tibet, where more than 500,000 Tibetan rural surplus laborers were trained. In his concluding remarks, Zen said, and I quote, "In the context of Beijing increasingly assimilative ethnic minority policy, it is likely that these policies will promote a long-term loss of linguistic, cultural, and spiritual heritage." In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that what is happening in Tibet is not only about the Tibetan people and their religion. It is more about the future of one of the oldest religions in the world, having more than 2,500 years of history and religious harmony and toleration in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sutimla. Just before I go to the next speaker, perhaps I could ask a small question to Dr. Sutimla. What are the mechanisms or tools that the Chinese Communist Party use so that the religious practice from the young age are not allowed? What are the mechanisms they use? Did you hear me? You're on mute.
So, am I audible now? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, could you repeat the question, the particular question?
Just asking you, what are the tools or the mechanisms that the Chinese Communist Party are using so that the lineage and the young monks and nuns are not allowed to educate in the religious practices as their teachers and elderly Tibetans have gone through? So what are the mechanisms they are using so that there is a break in the chain of learning?
Okay. I think I think from the seventh Tibet War Forum, one can conclude that Xi Jinping, he has clearly mentioned about the strengthening of patriotic education to the young Tibetan children, like teenagers as well. So they are, the CCP are very much insecure about the growing sense of nationalism among the Tibetan young children, So I guess the mechanism is, in the sense, they have created a kind of a like punishment. They have not. There is the tool is that they have issued the notice. For example, in Lhasa, a series of notices were issued, which direct the parents not to send their children to any religious function or activities. If they send their children to any religious activity, then there will be a political punishment. And they, as I mentioned before, the points will be deducted. So it's the mechanism is a kind of a sense of a fear has been created. If you send your children to a particular place, you will be punished. Or if you learn Tibetan language in a particular a school which has been banned, from starting. So the mechanism is like I guess it's fear. But for monitoring the Tibetan people, as I mentioned before, they have introduced grid management, where the Tibetan neighborhood are forced to monitor their own neighbors. Neighbors are forced to monitor their own neighbors. As I mentioned before, because of this atmosphere of fear and suspiciousness, Tibetan people are on guard with each other. So there's a sense of suspiciousness and fear. I guess this is the biggest mechanism to prevent anyone from learning anything.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sutimla. Now I will just go for our second speaker, who is Nijat Turkhan. And Nijat Turkhan was born in Urumqi in East Turkestan, and he came and settled in Sweden from 2004. Mr. Nijat is a Swedish-based Uyghur activist and has been actively involved in the cause of East Turkestan since 2007. He studied international relations, political science, and East Asia studies at the prestigious University of Stockholm. Mr. Turkhan is the chairman of the Uyghur Educational Association based in Sweden. He has been a regular contributor to the Uyghur Research Institute since 2018. Mr. Uyghur, the screen is for you.
Thanks for having me. It's a great honor to be being among you. I would like to go into topics as soon as possible. I would like to highlight today is China's religious policy in the East Turkestan. And we all know that China is known for the tight constraint of religious freedom and even the religious repression. But we have to look at what China's the constitutional law says. In China's constitutional law, Article 36, it says the citizens of the PRC enjoy the freedom of religious belief. Non-state organ, public organization, individual compels the citizen to believe or not believe any religion. But in reality, we have to check the reality. What's happening in East Turkestan from the religious perspective, from the religious freedom? From the occupation 1949 to 1958, there was the first period of the China's religious politics. China tried to exercise a full and effective control and on religion affairs through the administrative agency, and China also decided the religion has to the 5 characters. There's a must, national, international, and the complexity and the long-term character, which is a unique decided with China's socialism, China's socialist characteristic in the management of the religious affair. The second period is from 1958 to the late 70s. During the Cultural Revolution, China believes that religious freedom was a poison. The freedom is a negative aspect. The religious issue was a completely equated a political issue, was also defined total and extreme security. The next period from after the China, the Cultural Revolution ended, starting the 80s, China offers some kind of space for the people of East Turkestan, for the practice of religion and follow the tradition. But even during this time, it became illegal to study religion, specifically Islam, so privately. Official religious practice is closely monitored, and the state has appointed religious leader, and the party member party member is forbidden to practice any religion. The next period is from the 19th to 2000, earlier 2000. During the more than 10 years, the reform opening up, the policy freedom, and the religious freedom has been continuously implemented. China tried to gain some kind of role for religious organization, improve to religious institution and strengthen construction of religious work. But under the party's leadership, over all religious work. That means the penetration of CCP on the religious affair became more evident. The next next period is specifically from the 9/11 to the 2016. China had adopted one state-controlled religion, the model, and expanded the depth control of religious affairs, religious education, even the religious press and the publication has been broadly restricted, and the Uyghurs' religious identity has been coupled with terrorism, separatism, extremism. So from the 9/11s, China tried has labeled the Uyghurs as a terrorist groups, and they stepped up the cracking down the Uyghurs. Their religious identity and belief was broadly targeted for repression. Jiang Zemin, the Chinese president, said 2001, December, said, "We will never allow the use of religion to oppose the party's leadership and the social system, to undermine the unification of the state and the unity among the various nationalists," which means they don't allow any religious, they see the religious activity as which might threaten the national security. After the 2001, China tried to control the religious activity in East Turkestan, which designed its ethnic splitterism. China's the party secretary Wang Leqian stressed that the major task they faced in the East Turkestan was to manage a religion and guide it, being the subordinate to the central task to economic construction, unification of China, and the objective to the national unity, which resulted in narrowed the scope of normal religious activity by legislation of the state control on religion. To implement a restriction on the freedom of religion in practice. And even the next steps of controlling religion in all education system. China forbids a religion within the state educational system. There's the students they're not allowed to practice religion in school. They're not allowed to go to the mosque during their studies. And 2002, the restriction steps up. So all educational system, including university, they are forbidden to practice religion. Since 2016, the situation worsened much more than we can imagine. That China's new anti-terrorism law was adopted, and several aspects of the law can be directly linked to religion, which is Islam, which leads to persecution of Uyghurs more broadly. And a number of examples is those having been asked to pray and possessing religious literature and the religious expression and having to abstain from alcohol, cigarettes were defined as extremism, consequently being sent to the education center, which we call the concentration center. All religious activity of Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz have been practiced, banned. Insulting the Islamic religious belief are widely practiced, the forcing Uyghurs to eat non-halal food. Even the Sinicization of religion has started. China has started it, Sinicization of Islam, which aims at Sinicization, focusing to reduce the influence of foreign elements. The ultimate goal is that creates a purely China version of Islam and ensures that the Muslims in China follow the atheism and reduce its connection to the the Muslim world. According to some documents of Chinese government, they think that Arab culture is regarded as a cancer, even the Islam also. China believes that the culture should be completely removed from the Muslim groups in China. China has also tried to marginalize the Muslims community, also marginalize their religious practice also. The next one is destruction of religious building, the mosque. The many mosques, according to the report, nearly 5,000 mosques has been demolished since 2016. The mosque community have only one mosque remaining, which is if the house resistance, which is heavily monitored also, the mosque. The next one, the eradication of religious identity and belief. Since 2000 April, the religious freedoms are limited, has been subjected to further restriction. The National Legislation Authority in Turkestan launched the education camp, where several millions of Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz has been detained, abandoned their cultural and religious identity by political indoctrination. Uyghurs have been imposed themselves both emotionally, physically, from the faith. China's attack on the religious freedom is destroying Uyghurs' national identity. You might wondering why China is doing that. I concluded that China's nationalism, which is a Sinocentric and Hogomon, is more eager than any other nationalism to assimilate other culture, language, religion, and identity. The second reason is China's repressive religious politics, increasing religious politics, so originated from this colonial politics of the authoritarian state, which is China. What impact the China's religion repression has caused? The repression model has been exporting and implementing other parts of China. It is against our universal democratic values, which dignifies and defends religious freedom. And it's undermining also the function of the international system. The last one is what should be done. I will personally suggest a sanction, specifically economic sanction, is more peaceful and effective. And even we should also strengthen the international system in order to prevent further religious oppression. And even the International Criminal Code to start an independent investigation if China is committing a genocide, including what extent that religious freedom has been restricted and banned. The last one, the China's membership in UN Human Rights Council should be questioned because its human rights violation in Tibet, South Mongolia, Hong Kong, and East Turkestan. Thanks.
Mr. Nijat Tukur, thank you so much for sharing your wonderful narration. And it's so often said that the path the Communist China has taken to destroy the spirit of faith community is so similar. What you have said has been almost mirrored in what has happened in Tibet. But just before I go on to the next speaker, almost in the same line, how do you, there are two things. Mm-hmm. Is this forcing Uyghurs to eat non-halal food? Is this quite a new concept? And also, could you just elaborate something? The education system in China do not allow religious studies in schools and all this. How does young Uyghurs learn the Muslim faith? How do they educate themselves from a young beginning?
So unfortunately, since China started concentration camps officially April 2017, they forced the Uyghurs, the people in the concentration camp, to eat the non-halal food. They tried to cracking down their self-belief, self-conscious, their religious identity. And that they're forced to them denounce their religious identity also. Regarding to the young people to study their religious knowledge, there's no room for the young Uyghur and other people, young generation, to study the religion, because over the millions of people has been put in the concentration camp. Even their left family, the family members, specifically children, has been moved to the specific school. The children forced to study the Chinese Confucian studies, which is aimed to assimilate the Uyghurs generation to be pan-Chinese next coming years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this. Now I'd like to go to our third speaker, who is Father Bernardo Carvalheira. I hope I have spoken this okay. He's a missionary and father of Pontifical Institute of Foreign Missionaries. He was a member of the editorial board of the Vatican International Press Agency from 1997 to 2002. He is a journalist and current head of Asia News press agency. He is a vivid contributor to various papers, magazines, and other publications, and collaborates with radio and TV news programs. Father Cavalera has also lived in Beijing, where he taught history of Western civilizations of all things at Peking University between 1995 and 1997. Some of his notable publications include Mother Teresa, Mercy of Asia and for the World in 2017, China Mission, Journey Through the Empire between Market and Repression, so eloquent, in Italian 2006, and God is One Woman's Side. Wonderful stuff. Father Cavalera, the screen is for you to speak for the Catholic and Christian persecutions under the Chinese Communist regime. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much also for the invitation. I am very honored. As you said, I was asked to say something about the persecution of Christians in China. But as a first step, I would like to clarify the terms we use. First of all, the word Christians, because in China, the word Qitutiao or Qitutu indicates the Christian Protestant communities, which in Mao Zedong time, in 1954, were pushed to unify in the Three Self-Patriotic movement, renouncing to their specific denomination. We can call it a kind of forced ecumenism. In China, Catholics, who of course believe in Christ, are referred to by a specific name, Tianzhujiao or Tianzhujiao. For the Beijing government, Christian and Catholic communities belong to two different faiths, just as if they were two different ethnic people. Instead, in this essay, I will talk about these two communities together as Christians, as their situation in terms of persecution is very similar in many aspects. I will use the terms Protestants and Catholics when there are specific patterns in their persecution. The second term we need to define is persecution. The Italian Treccani Encyclopedia defines it as a complex of systematic actions of force aimed at crushing a political or religious movement, reducing or even eliminating an ethnic, social, and similar minority. Definitions are very important because, perhaps you know, but some political and religious leaders around the world often declare that in China there is no persecution at all, that freedom of religion is protected by the constitution, and that the nation's churches and temples are full of people. Sometimes these political and religious leaders admit that with some communities there are problems and difficulties, and they remain silent or hide what is happening every day in the life of Christians. They admit that the Beijing government obliges Christians to follow some rules, which are sometimes strict, but this cannot be called persecution. However, if we want to use words with their proper meaning, obliging people to follow rules against their will and against their faith is persecution. What happened to priests, sisters, and seminarians in Baoding, in Hebei, some weeks ago is persecution. On the morning of November 2, two priests from the unofficial Catholic community in Baoding and more than a dozen seminarians and nuns from the same community were forcibly taken away by government officials. After a few hours, seminarians were released, but on the same day, Father Lu Genjun, former Vicar General of Baoding Diocese, who spent already many years in prison, was taken away. And until now, no one knows where they are being held. It is quite evident that the official government action is imposed with force and aims to reduce or eliminate the expression of the underground community of Baoding, which counts 500,000 faithful. The same thing happened in other underground communities in Hebei, Henan, Zhejiang, Fujian, Guangdong, Guizhou, Heilongjiang, Xinjiang. What happened also in Zhangjiajie, Hunan province, on October 13 is also persecution. On that day, Pastor Zhao Huaiguo, founder of the Protestant Bethel House Church in Zili County, was tried for inciting subversion of state power. This serious charge, which would appear to suggest that the pastor were a terrorist, is based on the sole fact that the Reverend Zhao did not want to register his church in the Three Self-Patriotic movement. For the accusation, Reverend Zhao risked being condemned to up to 10 years prison. The website China Aid reports that since last year, authorities have charged numerous believers in China's Anhui, Henan, and other places with various fabricated crimes, with sentences ranging from 2 to 5 years. One anonymous believer in Anhui reported that officials charge and sentence many Christians in the province for crimes such as picking quarrels and provoking troubles. Now, this situation is in line with the attempts made by Mao Zedong in 1954 for Protestants and 1958 for Catholics, and by his successors, that is, to destroy or control all religions, putting them under the guidance of patriotic associations linked to the party. These associations verify if the life of the communities follow the path of socialism and of patriotism, separating themselves from the foreign powers. In this way, an atheist organization becomes the guide of a religious institution. The communities who follow the patriotic associations are the so-called official churches, who enjoy a very reduced freedom of worship. Those who do not accept to be enrolled in these associations and try anyway to have their rights and meetings are considered criminals. The situation has become even harsher starting from February 1st, 2018, when the government issued the new regulations for religious activities, in which they state that only registered personnel in place of worship have the right to perform their activities. Activities carried out in unregistered places and with unregistered personnel are subject to heavy fines between 100 and 300,000 yuan, means 13,000 to almost 40,000 euro, just for unauthorized activities. In addition to incurring fines, sites that host illegal activities will be closed down, seized, and expropriated by the state. For all of this, since February 2018, many communities have been forcibly closed, convents and places of worship destroyed with bulldozers, including some shrines in Shanxi and Guizhou. It is estimated that in 2018, at least 30 Catholic churches have been closed and destroyed. Some churches in Henan and Zhejiang have been destroyed even during the quarantine imposed on the country because of the pandemic. There are also churches, official churches, that are destroyed in the name of urban expansion, as in Qianwang or Liangwang in Shandong, and whose land is seized for building development without any compensation. The same happens for Protestant communities. Last May, a raid of the police in Xiamen, Fujian, closed the Xinguang Church. In December 2018, has been closed the Rongguili Church in Guangzhou. In September 2018, was closed the Zion Church in Beijing. In the same period, was closed the Early Rain Covenant Church in Chengdu, Sichuan. Its founder, the well-known Reverend Wang Yi, was arrested in December 2018, along with 100 other members of his community. And after nearly a year of pre-trial detention, he was tried behind closed doors on December 26, 2019, and sentenced for subversion to 9 years of prison. His political rights denied for 3 years, and his personal assets confiscated. Now, another way of obtaining the submission and elimination of the Catholic faith and other faith also, I would say, is nationalist patriotism or Sinicization. Already some of the speakers, they stressed this aspect. According to the dictates of Xi Jinping, expressed in a speech in 2015, the Church must not only assimilate Chinese culture and express its creed with the Chinese categories, but must create theologies, history, works of art according to the dictates of Chinese culture. Again, it falls to the Patriotic Association to verify this is being done. But the race for inculturation has become iconoclasm, with the destruction of works of art from the past, perhaps because they are too Western, and that of external and internal church decoration, demolition of crosses from bell towers, destruction of domes and facades considered not Chinese in style. Patriotism obliges communities to hoist the Chinese flag on every religious building, to sing patriotic hymns before liturgical services, to hang a portrait of Xi Jinping even on the altars. For the official communities, the situation is not better. Although faithful try to circumvent the new regulations, it is clear that the government and the Chinese Communist Party want a total submission to the party. This is a condition asked for the recognition of bishops, priests, and pastors. Other conditions are not to evangelize in places out of the registered ones. For example, you cannot talk or pray at hospitals, in public meetings, on the road, or in schools. Religious leaders also must forbid to youth younger than 18 to have religious education. So in the name of the Sinicization, religious leaders become like state officials, simple instruments of collateral support to the party. There is persecution also for the common faithful. Children who at school declare their faith must be suspended or expelled from school. People who are Christian cannot join in the army or state offices. Now, although the Chinese government boasts about its atheism and says that China is the most atheist country in the world, sociologists affirm that at least 80% of the Chinese believe in some spiritual dimension, and sooner or later they search and find refuge in some religion. This explains why there is such a strong growth in Baptists, among Catholics, and even more among Protestants. But I would say also among other religions, such as Buddhism, for example. Religion has some spiritual link which guarantees my human dignity and freedom in front of any external force, is considered as an enemy by the political power. This is why in the new regulations, religions are described just as a big problem. In fact, the religions can harm national security or public safety, undermine ethnic unity, divide the nation, conduct terrorist activities and separatism, infringing upon citizens' rights in their persons and democratic rights, impeding the administration of public orders, and so on and so on. This negative vision of religions goes hand in hand with the total control of the communities. Cameras placed at all religious sites, police checks in celebrations, dog units for anti-drug checks during liturgical services. And this is applied not only to underground community, but also to official community. Now I would conclude. What happens to Catholics and Protestants in China also happens to other religions, as we have heard today, but also to civil society and to the business world. In recent years, control of media, social networks, populations, NGOs has grown, and even in the business world, submission to the party is required on fear of kidnappings, arrests, and convictions. Freedom of religion and freedom of the society are linked. The international community and all religious communities in the world should ask China to produce a law on religions, not regulations aimed to control religions seen as an evil aspect of the society. This should be done for the good of the Chinese people, who without this freedom can only be slave of materialism, consumerism, exploitation, and pollution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Father. Is so detailed, and the account has been so wonderful, because quite often religious persecution is somehow on the surface. It seems related to ethnic and other nationals, and by far and large, the Christian community in the communist China is Han nationality. So do you, in this sort of semantic way, find the voices raised against the Christian persecution less vocal in the international community than, to say, Buddhists and Uyghurs of other faiths? Or do you think they are coming up in the similar nature, similar force?
Persecution in China is similar to every other communities. The way in which the international community looks at it, I think they are forgotten altogether, because there is an interest in politics and economic relationships with China. So this politics and political and economical relationship with China pushes people and political powers to reduce the idea of religious persecution. This is the point. We live in a, how can I say, in a world in which political powers are cautious to say something about religious persecution, because they fear that their economic relationship will be damaged, and because the economic situation is in the world is terrible, so everybody tries to have some advantage.
Yes, thank you so much for this clarification. I thought think in this line as well. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, let me go to our final speaker, who is Mr. Nico Binan. He is the president of Falun Dafa Association in Belgium, and he is a practitioner of Falun Gong. Mr. Binan is the president of the Falun Gong Dafa Association in Belgium, and he annually organizes the Shenyun Performing Arts, which when they came to England, I happened to see that as well. Since 2008, he has been practicing this Chinese spiritual discipline, and he has a huge passion for Chinese culture, which we'll hear for more, and he often talks about Chinese cultures to various associations and events about Chinese and 5,000 years of their authentic Chinese culture. We'll have to come back to that. Mr. Binan was a reporter of New Tang Dynasty Television, an independent Chinese media group based in New York. So, Nico, the screen is for you to make the case for Falun Gong.
Thank you.
Persecution.
Hope you can hear me well. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you.
My name is Nico Berners. I'm the president of the Falun Dafa Association in Belgium. I'm very honored to be here, invited as a speaker at the forum today. I'll take the opportunity to talk about the persecution of Falun Gong in China. Falun Gong, a spiritual practice that has been persecuted now for over 20 years. This persecution has had a very devastating effect on Chinese society. So as you can see, I'm not Chinese. Actually, Falun Gong is practiced all over the world in more than 100 countries. For myself, it started in 2008. I received a book, and this book was titled Zhuan Falun. Turns out that it was the basic text of a spiritual practice called Falun Dafa. Another name, it's actually the same practice, Falun Gong, Falun Dafa, two names used for this discipline. I read this book from beginning to end, and I was truly inspired by it. I learned about all different aspects of spiritual practice, self-cultivation, refinement of body and spirit, so to say. As I understood from it, it basically came down to explaining the importance of three basic principles. In Chinese, they call it Den Shan Ren, and translated it means truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. So I also learned the exercises that go along. There's a set of 5 slow movement exercises, meditation exercises. So what you get is then what is called in Chinese Shulian. It's cultivation, so refinement of body and spirit, not just doing physical exercises, but actually working on your character based on these universal principles. I thought it was great, and I learned it had been very popular in China ever since it was introduced to the public in the early 90s, 1992 to be specific. But I also learned that in 1999, starting since 1999, Falun Gong had been heavily persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party. I heard all kinds of terrible stories about imprisonment, torture, labor camps, families being torn apart, people disappearing in thin air, and many of them never returning home alive. Right? And all of this for practicing truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. Now, you can imagine, of course, being a Western person, that it doesn't make any sense at all. So what was going on here? Actually, for us Western people, it's very hard to understand. It's very difficult to grasp what is going on in this kind of a environment, this kind of communist system. Actually, there's different reasons. One of the reasons was the popularity of the practice. At the end of the 90s, there were about 100 million people practicing Falun Gong in China. That comes down to about 1 out of 13 of all Chinese citizens. So it's huge. It's a huge amount of people. At the same time, at that moment, you had 100 million people practicing. You had around 60 to 70 million active members within the Chinese Communist Party. So Falun Gong, in the eyes of the CCP, had become, so to say, even more popular than communism itself. And of course, in a communist regime, that is totally unacceptable. Another reason lies within the principles itself. You have truthfulness, compassion, tolerance. These are also the main principles of, respectively, the Taoist teaching, the Buddhist teaching, and the teachings of Confucius. So this is what is called the 3 great teachings that you can find in 5,000 years of authentic Chinese culture. So Falun Gong is, in that sense, you might say, is rooted in the authentic Chinese culture itself. So after the Cultural Revolution, it was actually this part of Chinese culture and history that was completely eradicated. So you have Falun Gong becoming very popular in China. Many people started to practice it. And actually, it became kind of like a bridge to the past, to exactly that part of Chinese cultural history that was initially eradicated by the communists during the Cultural Revolution. In an atheist system like this, of course, this is all totally unacceptable. Beijing became very nervous. Actually, it was the president at that time and the head of the CCP as well, Jiang Zemin, who was he's the one who personally started the ban of Falun Gong. So it was July 20th, 1999, to be specific. From one day to the next, Falun Gong was announced that it was illegal, banned, no longer possible to practice it. So this persecution actually it intensified very fast. Practitioners didn't want to give it up. You know, they said we benefit from this, our health, also mentally. They didn't want to give it up just like that. So what you got is arrest campaigns started all over China. People started to disappear, started to be arrested, put in prisons and labor camps. And this escalated into a very brutal persecution that is still going on to this very day, more than 20 years already. For those who went through that, many of them have said, well, it felt like the Cultural Revolution had started all over again in China. That's how intense it was, especially in the beginning years of this persecution throughout China. People were again forced to choose between traditional norms and values on one side, and on the other hand, that little red book of Mao, so to say. But it didn't stop there. It went further. And a few years later, actually, a report came out that was published by a human rights lawyer, Canadian human rights lawyer called David Matas, and a former Canadian Parliament member, David Kilgour. And the report was called Bloody Harvest. Now, this opened a completely new chapter in the story of persecution. They found advertisements on websites of hospitals throughout China that indicated that you and I, they said, if you need an organ transplant, right, and you need it urgently, well, come to China. And in China, we will help you within 10 days to maximum 3 weeks after the arrival. That sounded very strange to them. Right? I'm from Belgium, right here. If you need, for instance, a kidney, and you are on a waiting list, it can lead up to 6 to 7 years on average. It's normal. And we have an organ donation program in China. At that time, there was actually no organ donation program at all. So this was very strange. They started an investigation based on these findings. Now, the result of that investigation indicated that the source of these organs is within that system of prisons and labor camps, where they're using this huge volume of prisoners of conscience as a living data bank for donor organs. Many of them are Falun Gong practitioners. Actually, there's also, of course, the Uyghur Muslims are being victimized in this also, but also Tibetan and house Christians. Right? All of them, you can find them all in there. Practically, how does it work? So someone, for instance, is in a critical situation. This can happen. People are on a waiting list and they come at a critical point, urgently need an organ, and then they go into this offer from China. So they travel to China, bring a big bag of money, of course. Not for everyone, prices are very high. And when they arrive, they take their medical data. Based on that, they search, right? In this, they have so many prisoners that there's always someone who matches with the patient. That person is picked out, brought to the operation table, and actually is being killed on the operation table. So let it be clear, and this was also clearly said in this research, that the operation always becomes the execution for the donor. So first investigation brought out a number of 41,500 cases between 2000 and 2005. Later there was an update. This was already 2016. Then they came with totally new numbers. And they said, instead of what people thought, that probably this is something that will die out when people start to pay attention to it, it seemed that that was not the case. It was still rising. They talk now about 60 to 100,000 cases per year. Now that is genocide, right? Later on, there was an independent tribunal. This is very recent, actually, 2018, 2019. There was a tribunal organized in London, chaired by Sir Geoffrey Nice, who is also the one who has been leading the Yugoslavia tribunal many years ago in The Hague. And he also led this independent tribunal in London. He's a very respected person in the field. Now, the final conclusion of this tribunal came out in June 2019 and indicated the same terrible thing, namely forced organ harvesting has indeed been happening on a significant scale throughout China and has made a substantial number of victims throughout the years. So all this is a very painful illustration of how under the CCP there is no value for human life whatsoever. Many people sometimes look at the CCP, might still have false hopes for the party, that they might adopt to our Western standards. Sometimes it's based on their appearance, right? It's no longer that gray looking communist bloc that we saw in the Soviet Union. No. They're wearing shiny suits, right? They're driving BMWs and Mercedes. They built their cities even more modern than ours, right? Using technology that even we don't have. So they give us the impression, or try to give us the impression, that they've become more Western, right? Have become like one of us. Forget it, it's all a facade. Right? Make no mistake. For the CCP, there is no value for human life whatsoever. Forced organ harvesting is still happening in China today. Someone who is sanctioned and imprisoned by the CCP, if that happens, then you are owned by the CCP. You lose your identity. You're nothing. You become an object. At the same time, unfortunately, what we also see is that the international community seems to be turning a blind eye. Even the media, you can see that, right? Sometimes people ask me, why don't I read this in the newspapers? And then I say, well, I have the same question. I can give you a very painful example about this. A very recent example, something I heard last week, actually. There was a webinar where Sir Geoffrey Nice, who was the chair of this China tribunal, participated himself, and he told a story about how he knew that at the moment when they were publishing their final conclusion of the China tribunal, the BBC was preparing a documentary that would be aired about forced organ harvesting. And it was, according to what Sir Geoffrey Nice himself indicated, it was the UK government who walked in and asked the BBC not to air this program. These are very disturbing facts. That program never got on the air. Of course, there's always CCP behind, right? We know that always behind the scene interfering and always trying to pressure and direct our government officials to follow their guidelines on how to handle these issues. So the Falun Gong issue is a very sensitive, that's for sure. Human rights violations, the atrocities that are involved are so hideous that and the CCP will do anything in their power, whether it's through their ties to foreign governments or their propaganda machine, to suppress this information from coming out in the open. So therefore, I'd like to also thank you very much for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to share with you about this and share about the persecution of Falun Gong and forced organ harvesting as a terrible chapter in our human history. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nico. Just before I go to our other questions, live coming from the screen as well as from Facebook, I just wanted to ask you a small question for which maybe you could give me a few lines. How does the Chinese Communist Party regard Falun Gong? Do they regard this as a religious order, or do they? How do they see this? They are not ethnic. They are not. Are they a religious order? They see this, or do they say this is some group of hands who are making trouble? How do they see this?
Well, it started out actually as a form of qigong, right? Qigong is it means there's a very strong spiritual component to this. So to say that it is a religion, well, for many years, I mean, if we are invited to speak on a forum like this, when it's about religious persecution, then for me, there's a belief in there, but it's more like a spiritual belief. It's more about spirituality, unity between man and human being, and unity between body and spirit, so to say. So in this way, that's what Qigong is really all about. It's as old as the Chinese culture itself, really. It's just that the Chinese Communist Party, of course, they have used propaganda to label Falun Gong in a way that their persecution was justified. Just like what they did with the Uyghurs, it was also shared today already, labeling them as terrorists. Well, in the beginning, they said Falun Gong are being banned because they disturb public order. That was the first. That's the first reason they gave. So what that means actually is that they had absolutely no reason at all. It's just they saw this huge body of people, huge volume of people following spiritual beliefs, which are as old as Chinese culture itself. And it doesn't match with that atheistic, absolute materialism, absolute atheism of the system. So then it's being eradicated, and they just put a label on it, right? So that is what the Chinese Communist Party does. They always use the media to start propaganda. And from that part on, whatever they say, it is propaganda. It's pure creating a label, and using it to justify these.
Thank you so much for your clarification and everything. So I would like to go, there are a few questions from the people who are present in the webinar, and I would like to call the name. And first one is, I would like to ask Tashi Chitsang, who is the president of the Tibetan Youth Association in Europe. Tashila, the screen is yours. Please make the question short and to the point, and let's go. Tashila. Where's Tashi? Tashi Shizang? Tashila, I think he's gone, yeah? His video is off, his mic is off. Maybe while he's trying to connect, I'll ask the second question from second person who wants to ask question from the webinar live audience is Telo Rinpoche, who is the representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Russia. Rinpoche, can I have your question to the panel, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my question is more towards Nijat Turgun. In your presentation slide, you had shown a slide that says post 9/11 labeling Uyghurs as terrorists, and a statement given by Jian Zemin where it says, "We will never allow use of religion to oppose the party's leadership in the social system or undermine the unification of the state and unity among various nationalities." Since that statement came post 9/11, is this statement directed more towards the Muslims, or do you think it was overall, including the Falun Gong, Buddhists, as well as the Christians as well?
Thanks for the question. Regarding the labeling the Uyghurs as a terrorist, it's China utilized the global war on terror. Specifically, they takes advantage the global many countries allied to launch a war on terror. The China utilized it specifically focus on the Uyghur Muslim, even the other Muslim in the East Turkestan. Regarding the when we come to the about the state unity, the threat to oppose the state unity, it's about all the people. Like the China try to define the Tibetan, Falun Gong, South Mongolian, even the last summer, even the Hong Kong is also defined as a terrorist. It's not only the Uyghurs, but this this address came December 2001 by Jiang Zemin.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Is Tashi there or not?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here. I'm really sorry. I had some technical issues.
Okay, please go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to thank the Tibet Bureau Geneva for organizing this third Geneva Forum. And I'm really glad that all the panelists and also Sonam Frasi are here to participate and moderate this really, really crucial panel discussion. So thank you for that. My question is directed to all panelists. What are your thoughts on the potential of an interreligious alliance against CCP's persecution of religious practitioners? And how do you think can civil society help to hold China accountable on an international level? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So, very important question. Maybe we could go from bottom up this time. So I'll ask Nico to answer first. Hello, Nico?
Yes.
Can you answer that question? Try to be short.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's going to be very hard to make China accountable for what they have done. I think what is very important now is that people have to realize the true nature of the CCP, which is not obvious, right? We see a lot of economical benefits going on. We see that China has emerged as a economical superpower, and this has made it very complicated. The West itself has attached itself to the CCP to a certain up until a certain level, and I think this is very important. If we talk about human rights to people in the West, we have to understand that we might keep hitting a wall every time if we do not make them understand that they have to first deconnect themselves from the CCP itself. If not, with their economical benefits and their arrangements that they have made, then at least mentally or even spiritually, first make them clear that they have to unhook themselves from the CCP itself. And for instance, when the virus broke out, COVID-19, it woke up a lot of people, made them clear that actually the CCP will always go for their own benefits. Not for the individual at all. When what happened in Hong Kong did the same. A lot of people are waking up now. So I have good hopes for the future, but this is a very complicated.
Thank you. I need to cut because we are running out of time. So I want to give all the panels other chances. So maybe may I ask Father Cavalier to say something on this, whether it is possible to have an inter-religious alliance against CCP?
I think that the inter-religious alliance should be done, first of all, it is in a positive way. For example, Pope Francis asked many representatives, religious representatives, 1 month ago in Rome. So I think that we should try to cooperate, first of all, for the well-being of humanity. And this is very important. Then we can together not fight the CCP, because it's very difficult. I think that the Communist Party of China is very strong, and religions cannot have that kind of strength. But we can ask always, all together, for a real religious freedom in China. And this should be done together with the civil society in China, first of all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's quite a new concept. So may I ask Turkhan to say whether it is possible to have a religious alliance, inter-religious alliance to combat the CCP?
I think the religion it's a very important. It's very important. It's a kind of strength, a belief, or spirit, which encourage all the nation to take action. If you see the China's repression in Tibet, in East Turkestan, the religious repression, it's a kind of the colonial repression. It belongs. It's not so simple. Simply the religious repression. It's a part of colonial repression. Regarding to the cooperate, I think we have a much better cooperation with Tibetans and the Hong Kongs and even the South Mongolians. We have much better the cooperation than before, but we need the strength of our cooperation, collaboration to fight in the fight against China.
Thank you. And may I ask the same question, whether inter-religious alliance can be forged to combat CCP, to Dr. Tenzin Sutimla, please. Hello, Dr. Tenzin Sutimla?
Connect. Yes. Yes. Hello.
Can you hear
Am I
me?
audible now? Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I believe none of us is stronger than all of us together. The concept we call unity, and I think we need to work together. Just like now, I think coming together in webinar like this is a good start. And I believe I think one thing we can do, as Father has mentioned in the hard power of CCP. Now it's very difficult for us. Not only for us, even for superpower like America to kind of defeat in the CCP or the China. So we have a space, a soft space, what we call a soft power. So we need to work together, and there is space to convince the Chinese people itself, because the biggest threat the CCP fear is the Chinese people itself. So we need to convince the Chinese people about the fact, about the truth what is happening in China, in Tibet, or in East Turkestan, or in Southern Mongolia. So we can convince the Chinese people. I think this is a good start. We should try to connect. We should work together, come together, and try to connect with the Chinese people itself. We need to convince them, not the CCP, which they want to get convinced. I think we should do this. Yeah, thank you.
So I think we are past the time, but maybe we'll stay on this because it's such an important subject. And I would like to ask one question, more or less related to the question that has been raised. And if we were to say how we should do this, because there are conflicts in a subtle way because apart from the Falun Gong and the Christians, the majority of the Buddhists and Uyghurs are more of a minority issue as well, or other nationality issue. So how, if we can bring this together, what sort of formats do you think, Father Cavalier, I want to ask, because you have so much experience in this, what sort of format one could take? You talked about Pope Francis asking for religious communities together, but that's news to me, but it doesn't matter whether it's news to me or not. How do you think it will take shape, if it's possible?
It's not a very, very simple answer that can be found now in this moment. But my idea is that, as all the popes have always said, that freedom of religion is the basic human rights. If freedom of religion is guaranteed, then all the other human rights could be guaranteed. This is why I think that we should try, first of all, to have a cooperation among religious representatives and religious personalities. I hope, for example, that we can share our address, our contacts, so we can get in touch also later and after this meeting, but to cooperate for the well-being of the society means to improve the spiritual dimension of the society, not only in China, but also in the West, because materialism, which means the indifference towards religion, is very strong also in the West. So this is the first thing. And this is why we should ask to the Communist Party, first of all, full religious freedom. Then, after the full religious freedom is guaranteed, and this we have to ask, we have to ask together, then we ask also for land, for democracy, and so on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to ask another question, because this is a subject which has been touched by everybody, and perhaps we could stay on this for maybe 6-7 minutes, so giving a chance for each panel to say a couple of lines. My question is this: what does each one of you understand by the word Sinicization? The fact that Communist China is not a Chinese construct. Communism is a European construct. The market economy on which they are embarking is a European construct. The dress they are wearing is a European construct. So where do you think Sinicization that China talks about so much, because nothing has left in terms of culture since Mao Zedong, to me. But how do you, each one of you, see this? So maybe I'll go to Dr. Sudimla on this. Very few short sentences. How do you see?
Yes. Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes.
Hello? Yes. I have very few points only. As Sonamla mentioned, what do you mean by Sinicization? So I believe, Sinicization as per CCP, means legitimacy, I believe, because they're trying to change everything. They're trying to own everything. They're trying to change the past. They're trying to legitimize which doesn't belong to them. For instance, the Sinicization of Tibetan Buddhism, which means actually Tibetan Buddhism came from India. So they have mentioned, one of the leaders, I forgot his name, he mentioned that Tibetan Buddhism, in short, Buddhism came from China. So in short, they're trying to own everything, or they're trying to change the narrative, or they're trying to legitimize everything. So Sinicization for me means legitimization of the CCP rules. Yes.
And my same question to Nijat. What do you think they are saying? Nijat, you are mute.
Yes. In terms of characterize Western liberal economic market and communism, I would like to point out the concept of the Chinese nationalism. What characters the Chinese nationalism? Because it's the driving force of the CCP or the CCP, and before the CCP, the Chinese Republic of China, all this regime, the cause of the Chinese nationalism. Because the Chinese nationalism, it points strongly to Chinese culturalism. It's a process of sinicization of other people, other culture, other systems. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the Uyghurs, the Tibetans, South Mongolians has been targeted for assimilation. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the Western political system has been targeted for changing with China's characteristic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And can I ask this same question to Father Cavaliera?
I think you are right. That is, the Communist Party has destroyed the Chinese culture, and in fact, Chinese culture is suffering still. We think that Chinese culture is a religious culture. Religious means Taoist, means Buddhist, means the ancestors' religions and so on. They are suffering also, like all the other religions and all the other aspects. So, in reality, this sinicization is just to be submitted to the political party, to the power of the Communist Party. This is nothing else. In reality, there are many more religious groups among Buddhists, for example, who restore temples, or Christians and Catholics who work for the history of China, that work much more for sinicization than the Communist Party.
Thank you for that. And can I go last to Nico? Probably Nico has more things to say because he's such a lover of Chinese culture. Maybe Nico, you can shed more light on the sinicization of religion into Chinese.
Well, there's one saying now in modern China that says, which is used by the Chinese people in general, and they say China is the CCP and the CCP is China. And this has become like a slogan. So the Chinese people, if you say something against China now, against the CCP, then you're actually saying something against China. And this is something that the CCP has used to make this happen, this kind of perception. It's totally wrong. Chinese history doesn't go back 70 years. It goes back 5,000 years. Mm-hmm. And it's indeed true, like I heard, that the Chinese, authentic Chinese culture has been completely erased from the memory of the Chinese people. The core and the essence of the Chinese culture is gone. And it doesn't come back when the CCP restores or their temples that they have destroyed during the Cultural Revolution. That's just for tourism. The essence of the Chinese culture itself is no longer there. So the Chinese people themselves will have to find a way to wake up from this nightmare. It's a kind of brainwashing process that was established by the CCP. And that is the hope for China, and also our hope, I think, that the Chinese people themselves can find a way to wake up from this and realize that this slogan is not true at all. China is not the CCP, and the CCP is not China, period.
Thank you so much. Much as I want to carry on, because it's such an interesting and we are having such a good conversation, but every good things must end. I would like to feel that faith community must win and will win without a fight. So with this, I would like to say enormous thanks to, first of all, to the Office of Tibet in Geneva, and then to all the panelists here who have contributed so much richness to our discussions here. Thank you very much for that. Just before I wrap up, I want to, because this is a week that we are celebrating our Geneva Forum, panel number 3 will be tomorrow, and it will be moderated by Kama Choyangla, who is the Secretary of the Department of International and Information Relations. Panelists on this will be Kishil Haktola, who is the Director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, Kelo Rinpoche, who is here, representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Moscow office, Piero Verni, author, journalist, founding President of Heritage Tibet, and Sawan Kyabola, representative of His Holiness in Tokyo, our Tokyo office. With this, I would like to say thank you so much and have a good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Recording has stopped.